Good morning, everyone. My name is Annie Larkin, and I'm the Associate Curator of Public Programs at the Amerind Museum. Thank you for joining us today for our talk, Metalwork in West Mexico, Interaction Between Mesoamerica and the American Southwest with Dr. José Luis Punzo Díaz. A special thank you to our members and donors who not only make this type of programming possible, but Amerind's mission to promote the knowledge and understanding of the native peoples of the Americas through research, education, conservation, and community engagement. If you'd like to become an Amerind member or donor, information regarding how to do so will be sent to all of our registrants, along with the link of the recorded lecture within a few days. Some of our things that we have coming up at Amerind include our bird pond, which is now open. It is a 1-mile round-trip trail that will lead you to a picturesque section of Amerind's property that has been closed to the public up until now. It is open every day from 8:30 until 3:30 p.m. and it is free for our members and $5 per person for non-members. Next Saturday at 11 a.m., Amerind will have an online flute and storytelling performance with Tony Duncan. Duncan has performed for audiences worldwide, including at the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, as well as the White House. Duncan has great achievements in both music and dance, and as a flute player, he is currently signed to the largest and oldest Native American music label, Canyon Records. We will be live streaming the performance on Facebook, and you can also register to watch the performance on Zoom. All right, so Dr. José Luis Punzo Díaz works for Mexico's National Institute of Anthropology and History at their center in Michoacán. He has done extensive archaeological research in northern Mexico and served as a prior director of the museum at Paquimé, el Museo de las Culturas del Norte. And with that, I give you José Luis. Thank you, José Luis, for joining us.
Thank you so much, Annie, and thanks. First, I want to thank Eric for the invitation to give this lecture. And of course, to all the Amerind staff that helps to make this happen and that incredible institution over there in Arizona. Well, first, before I start, I apologize in advance for my English. It's not that good, so I will try my best. So forgive me if I do something wrong on that. So, well, let's start. This happened, perfect. Okay, so today I want to present you the metalwork in West Mexico, an overview of the metalwork in West Mexico, and then we try to understand how these interactions between Mesoamerica and the American Southwest and Northern Mexico gets on thinking about in these types of material, of this copper material. So that will be all the guiding points that we're gonna have today. And of course, we're gonna start with the uprising of the metalwork. First, we need to understand, to understand how this connection happens, I want to first tell you that there's a lot of different places around the world that have the possibility of being important for sources of the development of metallurgy, both in Europe, in Africa, in Asia, have different places. But here in America, in South America, we have a very old sites, archaeological sites that have these kind of things, like Putuxio, for instance, in Ecuador, that have it's around 3,400 years old, and in the late formative, were found mold fragments where leanings of a sprinkling with tiny little drops of gold that demonstrate that was casting on that times. And also there are other parts, like for instance, in the Bolivian Altiplano, there are places where I found copper slags for smelting process, for instance, in the site of Guanacanti. And it's around also like 3,000 years old. So with that on mind, the thing I want you to know is that there's a very old tradition of metal of metal smelting in South America. So thinking of that, well, we have here some examples of the furnaces, for instance, like the Putuxillo one, the Inca Diguita in Chile, in the Andes, or even a lot of old cultures from South America have the different metal objects, and there's like these kind of models, for instance, this Moche model, that you can look how people are blow piping into the furnace to smelt metals, and that's the way it is, and that happens. There are like two main metalwork traditions in South America. Being very rough on that, and it's only for general purposes, we can divide it on two major ones. On one hand, we have the hammered, cold hammered Peruvian tradition, that it's these make these sheets and these cuttings and have all that designs of beautiful things. But in the other hand, we have the lost wax tradition from Colombia, and that's another way of doing things. We're gonna check it out a little bit later from now. So these are the big two things. So we have here an example of an Inca gold mask from Peru, and on the other hand, we have a Tairona from northern Colombia, Lost Wax, Bad God. They're very beautiful. Those are masterworks. And one of the important thing, it's not was excluding having different techniques. For instance, in Colombia, we also have cold hammered in different ways, or even in Peru or in Ecuador, we have a real mix of everything. So uh, from that, one of the important things, it's one of the major and the most important researchers on this topic uh, of understanding the relationships between South America, but most focus on Mesoamerican metallurgy, is Dorothy Hostler. Dorothy Hostler was have a lot of work on these things, and she proposed, and I'm absolutely agree with that, that the the metal work arrives into Mesoamerica as a whole package, as a whole technological package that goes from Ecuador to the west coast of Mexico. Dorothy Hosler proposes that happens around 600 AD, and well, she do some exercises, and she proposed like this trip of roughly 3,000 kilometers can be done in 6 to 8 weeks in a little boat. So when I was working in Pumapungo in Ecuador, I see at the warehouse in the museum, the gold museum over there, of these raft, and obviously catch my mind on that. And there's a lot of models like that, and there's another like Spanish paintings that could be happen these kind of connections. But on that topic, as in many others in this metal work, we have a lot of things to be done to have more data on these. But the important thing is we have to think about that the metallurgy came from place around Ecuador and goes as a and comes to Mesoamerica as a complete technological package. So, but for understand these, what they bring, what these people, what knowledge they need to take into Mesoamerica to see what's going on with this metal work. So I will give you a quick tour on how these things happens. But first of all, of course, you need copper deposits, mineral deposits, and Mexico, it's plenty of those. We can see those in this map. Hopefully, you can see my pointer. But the important thing of these, it's like we need um, certain combination of things. And this combination of things is to have complex societies that could start doing these or embrace this kind of technology. So West Mexico is exactly that part, that part of it, and what we call it the Copper Belt in the states of Jalisco, Michoacán, and Guerrero. This area we can see a lot. We have here a zoom of the deposits, and I'm running an archaeological project here, sponsored by the National Institute of Archaeology, the INA, in the area of the Tierra Caliente, where a lot of the copper mines were, and where we have a lot of different archaeological sites with these kind of evidence that we're going to talk about later in this lecture. Well, so it's important also to notice that uh, these kind of resources was very important since pre-Hispanic times, and there's different societies that wants to take control of those kind of those kinds of resources. Like in the late post-classic, a little before than the Spaniards arrived, like the Tarascans, for instance, have control for the mines, the major mines over there, and the smelting process, and a lot of things that we're going to talk about later too. So, well, on the project, we are working in this area. So the first stage of this, of course, is the mining process. It looks like obvious, but it's not that obvious when you are walking on more than 100 Fahrenheit degrees in this Tierra Caliente and try to look for these mines. There are very difficult conditions in a lot of ways in this part of the project. You have a lot of difficulties on that, but we have found some areas that we thought that could be parts of mines could be worked since pre-Hispanic times and early classic colonial times. So the first of all in the mining, or the idea of mining, of course, is to have these minerals to make ore and try and start to transform into metal. So first of all, one of the key ideas is like in pre-Hispanic times, the people that lives in West Mexico, they are mining copper carbonates and copper sulfurs, both of it. Uh, it's supposed to they are mining in superficial deposits. Of course, they don't do big pits on this. There's were no use of fire or rock cracking to do these. There are no tunnels, or there's supposed to be no tunnels, but now we found more tunnels with some of these parts could be pre-Hispanic or early colonial, and that's a problem that we have, all the people that works in metalwork in Mexico, because this thing continues from pre-Hispanic times to Hispanic to the colonial times. So there's not a very discernible division on these. And another important thing is there no was metallic tools involved in this process. So the first of all is to take these kind of stones, and the second part of this primary smelting process that we call it is to crushing the ores into small pieces, and then they pick it up, the ones that works and the other ones no. For instance, we know that that kind of work was doing by women and children, and different, and obviously men's too, but we have some very important historical sources about that. Then the process is to grinding that little stones, and that grinding process was made with the stone tools in this kind of a tables that like this one that we found in Jicalan in Michoacán. And then the idea is to have this on powder, and sometimes there's a roasting process on it for to the powder ore to be heated between 500 to 700 degrees to reduce the impurities the copper ore. So with that, well, this is when we have now the ore, and then we can start the smelting process. So in this kind of work, of course, we are doing some kind of analysis of archaeometric analysis. We use a lot of LIBS, laser induction breakdown, the spectroscopy analysis to doing this, and we are analyzing all the ores that we are founded. And now we, with this analysis, PCA analysis, sorry, we can isolate it in different parts, the ore, so we can start now having an idea or where the ores come because of the different mineral and element compositions as we see on these tables. So, mm, but now what's going on this? When we have this kind of ore, uh, then we have to smelt it. And on that, we are working with a master uh, smelter, Antonio Parrapureco, in Santa Clara del Cobre. And we are doing ethnography with them, and we're recording the sendada process that is a traditional smelting process using today even today in Santa Clara del Cobre. Uh, of course, we think that that was the way that was done in pre-Hispanic times. Of course, not using now this mechanic or electric air blowing inside. They are doing with blow pipes, and we have some exercises doing that, and it's possible to do it and reach 1,000, a little bit more than 1,000 degrees for smelting copper. So here we can see the whole process of the sendada, and it's a beautiful process, and it's very impressive thing how could be transformed into copper ingots, as we're going to see here. So uh, making these to have ingots, of course, there are like a different things. So in archaeological record, we found ingots in Tierra Caliente in Michoacán. We have these kind of ingots that are in Michoacán, like the ones we are seeing here. And in historical sources, we know that, for instance, in one of the most important mines named Cusian, uh, in this mine, they lived 20 people, 20 smelters when the Spaniards arrived. And each one smelter can do one ingot of around 10 pounds on every day. So now we can imagine the scale of the production in pre-Hispanic times. Of course, that we're going to change on time, and we're going to see that. But one of the important things is that here we can saw in some codex the process of smelting and producing some objects and ingots over here. But when you do an ingot and you refine the copper, you will obtain a slag. It's all the impurities of the copper that goes, and those are very important. And we found massive places with these kind of slags in Michoacán, and that they're very important because they gave us a lot of information about the process. So of course, we also are doing analysis, different kind of analysis on the slags, and we have the possibility also with the slags to identify uh, which ones were doing with the same, more or less with the same kind of ores, and we can start to distinguish that. And now we have here a map to see where are the mines, the most important mines that we're talking about. These Inguaran mine, Cosian mine, Bastan mine, and Churumuco mine that we are working on, and Santa Clara del Cobre that it's far away. It's 100 kilometers from there, up in the Michoacán Central Highlands. But that's very important. That's a very important thing. On the analysis of the slags, also with thermomagnetic graphs, we can identify different casting methods or different compositions on the slags. I don't gonna stop a lot of this because it's not the topic today, but it's very important for us to understand what's going on and how was the process and the technology involved on doing these kind of stuff. In the other hand, also we are doing some paleomagnetic dating. These kind of dating are not absolute dates like radiocarbon and other kind of stuff, because are more like tendencies. And with these tendencies, the important thing is that have different clusters with these slags. One very related to late um late pre-Hispanic times and early colonial times, and another one very identified on the late colonial times. And it's like a kind of a different kind of exploitation doing on copper on those times in the colony. So, but what happens in the field? So we have some production areas founded, and we work on it. This is we have identified on the Tierra Caliente in the Huitamo in the Balsas River region. We have at least two big sites that have these kind of evidence. One is Cupandarillo site, and the other one is Yacata del Paso site in the Huetamo Valley, where we found these sherds with the slags or like crucibles. We have these kind of a little smelt copper ingots or nuggets, and we have production of a lot of different items. But the important thing here is here we are doing a GIS map of where we have these kind of a slag or evidence of production. And we have this cluster, of course, in West Mexico, but also we have an evidence up there in Paquimé that I want to discuss at the end of this talk. So, oh, sorry, and the dates that we have for this context is 1350 radiocarbon dated. So it's a real pre-Hispanic area for metal production in West Mexico. In the other hand, we have another set of sites that goes from pre-Hispanic times to colonial times, and we have two major sites on that we are working on. One is Jicalan el Viejo, that it's nearby Uruapan. It's Uruapan, Michoacán, and we have, you can see, lots of slags, lots of evidence of production. We also have that on different historical sources. And in the other hand, we have Itziparatzico nearby Santa Clara del Cobre. Also, we have a lot of slag. In this, we can see the mounds here, the pre-Hispanic mounds, both sides. But the important thing here, well, we have here a very important work done by Blanca Maldonado from the Colmich, also doing a great work identifying and work with the slags in Itziparatzico site. But the important thing of these sites is these sites goes from pre-Hispanic times to early colonial. So it's a continuity on that. And there is a very important works going on that idea that the indigenous populations in West Mexico have a great idea and great technology for smelting copper, even superior that the Spaniards have when they arrive. So that's why that continue in the first part of the colonial times. So, but on the other hand, also we have a lot of other different sites. We have a big amount of colonial smelting sites in the surroundings of Santa Clara del Cobre. We have like mountains of slag, like the ones we see here. There's a soccer field in a school, and you can see the big mountains of slag over here, and you can see all in the court. We have a lot of different furnaces and evidence over there that we work on. But we have a lot of different sites, but that's another thing for another time. But the important thing here, it's like the major smelting process to doing ingots in pre-Hispanic times, we know was done even in the mines or in sites very close to the mines. So we're going to have these ingots, that's the ones we saw before, very refined copper ingots, and those ingots were transport from the mines to the major production centers. And that changes a lot of things that we are thinking about metallurgy, because with that in mind, a lot of people could smelt final objects, not doing the primary smelting, but doing the secondary smelting, as we're gonna see. These are like examples of a work that I've been done, like these mecapaleros, these stump line uh, persons that walks in this area of West Mexico. They can transport 20 miles in a single day easily, carrying on 130 pounds over on his back. And these kind of process and these type of people walking, we have evidence of people walking from the central areas of Michoacán, like Sinsunsan area, the Pátzcuaro Lake region, or the Valley of Toluca region, into the hotlands, even in the 1950s. In the 1940s, we have evidence that people still doing this before the major roads open. Probably a lot more later, probably even in the 70s, or could be people, the really people doing this kind of process. So that's very important to have in mind. So transport this is easy. It's not a big deal to transport the final ingots. So uh, in the mm, let me see what happens. Oops. Okay. Let me. Okay, now it's working. Okay, perfect. So uh, the second part of this thing, it's how to build the final objects. So the final objects were done in like in pre-Hispanic times, in three major uh, forms and very technological forms. So one is hammered, we can saw here, in Santa Clara, hammering an ingot for cutting the ingot and then start doing plates and pots from it. Well, my family come from that town, so that kind of things are very familiar to me. I do it when I was a kid, helping in this kind of with my cousins in this kind of things. So for me, it's very easy to think about how we can transform this into a pot. We can see these examples, but in the other hand, also we have here looking of how the gold was hammered in examples in Ecuador or in Colombia. So the second one is the mold, and we have here a codex looking how it's blow piping, and there's a mold, and there are casting here an axe, as we saw here. And in our work, we found out the molds, the original also molds, the pre-Hispanic molds in some of the warehouses here in the Museo Regional Michoacano. We have an axe here and another kind of, I don't know if it would be an axe or a tweezer uh, for doing these kind of things. But also if we look at these in Ecuador, also they use a very similar open molds to do these kind of hoes or axes or axe monies that we call this kind of form here. So that's very important. This and finally is the lost wax process. The lost wax process is to build these little things like figurines and bells and a lot of things. And also we are working with some traditional uh, handcrafts in Michoacán, and we have here all the process documented how they do these beautiful pieces of lost wax. So they have the central idea is to build it on wax, the elements that we want to have, and then we have like a mold, and then we take it out, we heat it and take it out all the wax, and then replace the wax with metal. So and then we're gonna have the final work. So with that in mind, so now we can start thinking about how these things could move into the north. Well, first of all, I want to say that there's like two major divisions of metalwork in West Mexico. These are proposed by Dorothy Hustler, as I mentioned, and we have the period one that it's proposed. It's around 600 to 1100s, 1200s, and primarily they are using copper. There are tiny evidence of alloys, but there are major copper and a little bit of silver, a little bit of gold, but more it's copper, and it's not so diverse in terms of the variety of things and forms where they're done. And in the period two, it's around 1100, 1200 to the Spanish invasion, and then it's a great repertory that changed a lot of things. There's a lot of alloys used. It's copper tin, copper arsenic tin, copper silver, and many others. It's an apogee of the metal work in Mesoamerica and in West Mexico. So we're gonna explore first the period one and understand how this starts moving into the north. But first, I want to say thanks to the project, because all this data came from a project that we are working on with the project named Connections and Impacts of North and West Mexican Cultures, and we're doing this with Ben Nelson of ASU, and there's a lot of people involved in this project. So my thanks to everybody that works on that and have all these lines and a big analysis that we are doing, and only I take the copper chapter for these. And of course, we have to talk about like four major works that are the foundations for these. Well, two at least, like the Pendergast in 62 with his classical work. It's very important. And of course, the 1994 Dorothy Hustler Sounds and Colors of Power, that it's like a major book on metallurgy in West Mexico, and gives us all the foundations of what now the researchers were we are thinking about the metal work in this area. But also there are two theses, very important ones, the Veronica Vargas, sorry, it's Victoria Vargas, in 1995 about copper belt trade patterns in the US Southwest, and most recent, the Ian McKelvey, that have a very interesting works on this if you want to read more. Well, uh, in the project, I want to say that the we are analyzing like 5,400 metal objects, and we are analyzing around 150 different sites with metallurgy activity or presence of metal items. So that will be our our sample. So in the map we can see all these dots, and then we GIS that and do some analysis on these. Like this analysis, we are doing this point cloud, point density analysis, sorry, and hotspot analysis, and that led us to identify the first major production areas. And of course, we can see like the red dots, and the red dots are, well, of course, in these parts of West Mexico. These orange dots are also important areas. And here they want you to notice that, of course, we have it here in Michoacán, Jalisco, Guerrero area, that we already know that. But also we have a very important in the analysis here in a site called Amapa, and we're gonna back later. And then we have another two dots, orange dots in this analysis. One in Paquimé again. Paquimé is always, it's like an attractor, always is bringing things over there. It's a very unique site, as you know. And the other one, it's in El Ombligo nearby Guasave, that have another particularities here that we're gonna talk about later. So of course we're thinking that this core zone, it's gonna move into the southwest, and these will become in form of the objects itself, but of course in terms of how all this ideology that came from and comes with these kind of objects could impact into the Southwest. So first of all, we need to talk about the early stages of how this starts. This is very important because the year 600 proposed, it's very difficult to have it clearly on that, because there's a lot of discussion on the sites, the early sites of the 600s, 700s. It's not very easy. The the first site that have evidence are the coastal sites of Tomatlan, Palo Herrado, Nahuapa, and Moret in Jalisco, or Amapa, Coamiles, Peñitas in Nayarit, the lower Balsas, all these parts. But as we see in this analysis that we done with all the the datings that we have from all the sites and the and 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 that makes some different clusters, and we have very spread data on these before 900. So I really think that we need to work a lot more on these, and probably we need to talk about more the entrance of or the consolidation of the metalwork in Mesoamerica uh, after 900, or at least is my proposal. But what happens in Mesoamerica at that time? So I think that's an important thing, because now we are focusing on technological division of that. But what happens with the people that lives at that times in Mesoamerica? First of all, we need to talk about that that the northern frontier of Mesoamerica, that goes more or less like around here, have before the 900s was a big expansion into this area of Durango, almost to the border of Chihuahua, and goes Zacatecas and all that. And we call that Chalchihuites tradition. And that Chalchihuites tradition uh, before 900, there's no presence or there's no evidence of metalwork. So, but what happens then, that inland part, this like Peter Jimenez says, this inland northern network collapsed in what we call epiclassic here in Mesoamerica, and there's a rise of another thing going up on the coast. And J. Charles Kelly, since the 1980s, mentioned it, and we call the Aztlan expansion that goes roughly around 900 to 1350. And this expansion goes all the way up into the west coast. And, and then the sites in the inland get abandoned, and some sites in the north, like like the Durango sites, getting to this new network of Aztlan network. So it's very important to think of that, because uh, the Aztlan networks of interaction manage a great network of prestige goods and information that start going from the northern lakes of Michoacán and Jalisco, like Chapala, and goes all the way up north into Sinaloa and to the border almost to Sonora. So it's very important to think, but these kind of these Aztlan thing, it's Aztlan, it's not an homogeneous archaeological culture as we think it. It's more like kind of different polities or different entities all the way, but they are linked with certain objects or certain ideas that moves all around. And these objects are like clay pipes, like certain types of spindle whorls, like musical instruments, shell works, certain ceramics as the ones we saw before, ones here in the picture, that beautiful, that have a gold sheet on the on as a mask. Or we have these Mazapan figurines, stone vessels, cranial deformation, teeth modification, among others. But the most important thing for us is the copper objects. So the copper came in this package. And here is when a mapa starts to be an important polity here in the coast of Nayarit. But also, there's important that there's a big other cluster. Here's a map, another cluster in the Chapala Valley, in the Chapala Lake, that that makes a huge cluster, and it's a consolidation of the elites that lives in that part, and will be an important issue for this network. So, but in these times, exactly this time is where all this expansion goes up all the way to the north, and we're gonna start showing before 1100 some metal objects into the southwest. So one of the important things is it's this type of bells, and I want to only concentrate on this type of bell. This type of bells, we call it Tlalok effigy bells. And this is it's a wirework face designs, but this is very important because this Tlalok or storm rain storm god complex came in this time, and it's very important in the cosmogony of the early post-classic period, and it's very associated with the rise of Tula, for instance, that it's a major city in central Mexico that starts around these 900s and going all the way up. But the thing is, these types of bells, we can see the distribution that goes all the way up to the north and gets into the sides of the southwest. So that is what it's the first time when this strong presence of this ideology goes all the way up to the southwest into the north. In this period one, of course, we can see that the major of the objects that we found out are bells. Uh, and the bells are the most important and presence everywhere. But if we see in the GIS analysis, the major variety of objects are here in the West, but since these times, since the 1100s, all the interactions that goes up to the north are mostly related with the presence of bells and not a lot of different other things that goes up the way up north. So thinking of that, there are like two major types of bells from this period of time that are so important. It's the type that IA globular bells and the IC flattering piriform bells. And we can see the distribution of the sides. These globular bells are the most common ones, and you can see it around a lot of places. These bells are the first ones that came and starts show up in central Mexico and the West Mexico in the 900s or even in the 800s, but they are going into the southwest around the 1100s and goes all the way to the 1400s to the 1500s even. We can see these type of bells going on, and these are examples from the southwest bells. So, but there's a major change that came on this history of metallurgy, and it starts in the period what the Dorothy Halter named period 2, and we're going to talk about that, and it's the apogee of the metalwork in West Mexico. This period 2 starts in the 1100s, we said, to the 1200s, to the Spanish invasion, and it's very important because, but what happens in Mesoamerica at that times? At that times, one of the important things is abandonment of Tula. The abandonment of Tula starts at that time, but also it's the rise of the biggest empires and the most complex societies of the period. And one of those gonna be in West Mexico as the Tarascans after the 1300s. So on that, we know that around 1150 to 1200, the city of Tula was abandoned. The same thing happens in Chichen Itza, that it starts the decline, and but well, that's the Maya region. It's another history on this metal work. But what happens, in the other hand, it's the rise of Cholula. Cholula was a very important city. As the chronicle says, it was the Mecca of the New World. It was very important, but one of the key things, it's like this Cholula, it's linked because it's in the Atoyac River. It's linked with the Balsas Basin, and this Balsas Basin will become one of the major routes that goes all the way to the north, and that we're gonna see on these metal casting things. And also, this route was isolated from the power of the major empires of the Mexicas or the Tarascans of those days. So, analyzing these, here we can see the cluster. It's very well done on the 1200 to the 1300s starts occupation of these of the sites. But there's important that we think about it more carefully. What happens between 1100 to the 1350s? Because that's a major change on the history of Mesoamerica at those times. So we need to start thinking about that in this history. One of the important thing is one of the greatest variability of objects in West Mexico. There's a prolific use of alloys, as we talk for. There are a lot of changes because those alloys, a lot of different ways of doing things, the sounds, the colors, as Dorothy Hosler says, it became a very important thing. But one of the important things here going up to the north, it's as we see here also, even to the major parts of the Aztlan expansion, it's where there are more variability, and we can see all the variability of objects of these times. But also, the only place where there's a great variability of things also again is Paquimé. So we need to think about that again, because Paquimé, it's a major key player on this metal thing in northern Mexico. Here, the most important type of bells that are here is this ID, elongate piriform bell, making with a lot of alloys. Here is the model doing by CT scanning that we are working to analyze better the forms of it. And with this kind of analysis, we're looking that there's a big variability on these kind of bells, and even the ones that are calling IDs, ID types in the southwest with the ones that we have here in Michoacán or in Oaxaca or in central Mexico, in Tenochtitlan, or even in the Maya area, are absolutely different. So we need to reanalyze that and have a lot more certainty on these type of bells. Uh, also, it's important to think that we are identifying, as we mentioned before, these sites in the Balsas River area, that in the 1350s, that we have these major production areas. We are analyzing those from the Huetamo Valley. And well, there's some of the analysis that we have, the type of bells that we are looking at. We have these vessels. We excavated a lot of these vessels, and with CT scan now we have analyzing the objects inside, and then have these models of with CT scan, and then also we have it the actual excavation of the vessels and analyzing the bells. But here that's why it's so important to think about what happens in this Balsas River, because in the 1300s starts the expansion of the Tarascan state. The Tarascan state starts in the central area of Michoacán here, and then going to start in the 1300s, and then in the 1400s, and at the end of the 1400s, they control all this territory. And of course, all this territory blocked or limited the path of metal objects to the north. And we're going to see that it's absolutely different what is happening inside the Tarascan Empire that we happens in metal, thinking of metal outside that. So in this time, the Tarascan Empire was dominated by a dynasty of kings called Calzones, and they have a very strong worldview based on the metal. The metal was so important for them and for the gods, and they are the most sophisticated symbols of power. Used like we can saw here, the major priest called the Petamuti, and we can see here this tweezer. It's very particular tweezer uh, that they carry on this gourd with turquoise and these metal sheets that we're gonna see, these rings with bells, or these lip plugs with gold and turquoise, or even the lords and the kings. They use these metallic ear plugs, these tiaras, or metal rattlers in their necks or in the wrists. Or even the kings, when they die, they put some gold discs, masks, tiaras, and all their metallic objects, their axes that are so important to them. So that's why now that's the thing that I call the imperial style, the imperial Tarascan style in metallurgy, and we're gonna see some examples here. We can see here these ID type of bells, but also we have these hose called tarequas in in Purepecha, but also we have pins with bells, probably welded. We have these axes, we have masks, we have pendants, or in the paraphernalia of the priests that we have these metal sheets that we can see attached to the cord, to the gourds in the codex, the tweezers, these rings with these weld or doing on lost wax uh, bells. This is the tip of a stick with a shape of a coyote, human coyote sitting on like in a little chair, or we have these gold masks. Or the other hand, we also have these beautiful discs that the one is in the Museo Nacional de Antropología with the complex scenes grave on here. We have the earplugs, we have plaques, gold plaques, silver plaques, gold rings, and also we have these lip plugs that are so important for the Tarascan societies, and those are cast with gold. And then we have a stone, like a blue stone, that could be, most of them are, a lot of them are turquoises. So that's what I call imperial style. But what happens on that? None of those goes up to the north. They stay mostly inside this controlled Tarascan area. There's a few examples outside, but a little bit on that. The only thing it's more moving from that kind of stuff, it's, or we think about that, it's these type of bells. There is this very complex turtle type of bells, but it's important to notice that this bell is the one that came from Paquimé. But if we saw the bells that are compared with the ones that are found with by Lumholtz, or this one that it's in the National Museum of the American Indian of the Smithsonian Institute, uh, well, there's a totally different way. So probably we need to rethink that more and have second thoughts on this distribution of of things. But what happens in the northern frontier of Mesoamerica? The northern frontier of Mesoamerica at that time have a big variety of things, like we have a lot of vessels, hooks, rings, discs, and also some things that are not happens anywhere else, like these chains that we don't see anywhere else. And those chains are founded in actual pre-Hispanic contexts by J. Charles Kelly, so that's so important. And we have bells that we found other places. We also have plagues that are not so common anywhere else. And also in this other part, we have also this other cluster that it's where it's happened, all this kind of stuff. And I want to stop a little bit with these open work air plugs that are very unique on style and are very represented in the northern Chalchihuites, uh, Aztlan sites here, but also we have it in a different places. So, but something is happened definitely in this area. I don't know if they are doing these things by their own or what happened, but there's no the same objects represented else anywhere else in the area. So, but what happens in the Southwest? Uh, and I want to say, and I want to thank the possibility of checking out different collections around the Southwest, most to the Arizona State Museum that let me work in their warehouses. Of course, the Amerind and the Smithsonian Institute, where I've been working on the collections. But if you see, the bells from the Southwest are mostly are copper. There are almost no alloys, like in Paquimé, and there's only these type of of rings, and there's certain types are not so common in the south, but most of them they're represented. So up into the north, with this great variety that we have in West Mexico, there are only going to bells into the southwest. Well, we have a little time. So, but at the very end, I want to say that what happens? It's possible to the people cast in the north. I I have to say yes. Of course, it's a very debatable thing, no, but copper objects are present in most of the cultures and cultural subregions of the U.S. Southwest, but never in the numbers or in the diversity of forms found in the South or in Paquimé, and that's why it's very important to talk about Paquimé on this. Uh, One of the things of metalwork on Paquimé is the Paquimé is supposed to be like the source of all southwestern metal objects, and that's totally wrong. It's myth. As we saw, there are objects that came from earlier than Paquimé was abandoned, was occupied. Sorry, but the peso and subsequent investigators the PESO proposed this, but subsequent investigators didn't find indicators of production of metal in Paquimé. So the major theme now is all the products came as a finished objects goes into into Paquimé. But I don't know. I think we have to rethink that again because, like for example, the largest number of bells found in any Hohokam site in the Southwest is 73 at Gatling. At least is what I know. But in comparison, there are like 654 metallic objects, all copper, in Paquimé, and only are 85 were bells. You know, so it's very important to think that in this image, courtesy of the Amerind, we can saw some interesting objects. One, of course, we need to mention there are four reported by the peso small copper ingots or natural nuggets like the ones we saw here, and a lot of and those presents evidence of coal hammering. So we have those ingots. Then it's a, oops, sorry. So, but it's important to say that uh, that in the Mimbres Valley, for instance, very close to the north, it's possible to find native copper nuggets on the ground surface or with little excavations. And on work, native copper nuggets are relatively common in prehistoric Mimbres sites. So that's another thing that we have on mind. And the other very important thing is this sprue. This sprue, it's an absolute evidence of secondary smelting process. Of course, we can say that could be like in a fire or something. Well, that would reach 1,000 uh, degrees. But there's a sprue over there. There are ingots. There are sprues. There are a lot more even in another sites that supposed to be. Nobody argues that there is no evidence of metal smelting in Mesoamerica. But here, I don't know, we have to think about this. And also an important issue, it's like in Paquimé, they are certain elements that are not present anywhere else in Mesoamerica or even in the Americas. One of this is an axe. It's a very important object because it's an axe doing it via two-piece mold, and it's a gorge, have a gorge the axe. I never see an axe like that anywhere else. And in Mesoamerica, as we saw, the axes were made in open molds and are totally different in shape and everything. So that's an important issue. Also, there are another kind of stores like these decorated vessels, like a nose screwer, and different objects that are not in anywhere else. And thinking about that, it's not that impossible that these things could be done in Paquimé. Of course, not in a large scale, but a very certain elite kind of thing. But well, and thank you so much for being on this lecture. I only want to finish this saying that we need to rethink about a lot of things as we talk about. We need to talk more about what happens actually in the archaeological areas in this big scale of time and and terrain. So we need to be very focused on see how these different periods of the metallurgy checked with the local develops, like the Aztlan tradition, like the Chalchihuites tradition, like the collapse of the epiclass in West Mexico, and the expansion in the early post-classic. So with that, we need to think about, and the only thing I want to mention too that I forgot it, it's like the context. I want to talk about the context of the bells, talking only about bells in West Mexico and in the Southwest is totally different. A lot of the bells on the metalwork found in West Mexico are normally associated with burials, and and that gave us a one thought of what they are thinking, the people are thinking on that. And in the other hand, in the Southwest are totally different. Most of them are in caches or in offerings. So that's another total way of use this, and the um, less frequent. I don't find the word in English to say that, but it's not so frequent. So those are another kind of uses different from West Mexico than in the Southwest. Well, thank you very much. And Annie, we will start with the questions. So let me know how we can do it.
Sure. If you just scroll down to the bottom, you will see the Q&A symbol. And before you start, I realized I forgot a very important part of your bio when I introduced you. You are one of Amerind's board members. And so
Oh
thank you
yeah.
so much for supporting Amerind, not only in this way, but through your support throughout the years. But your questions are right there at the bottom. If you press on the Q&A box, they should appear.
Okay. Perfect. But let me see if I can manage these. Do you screen it? Yeah. Do you send it to me? This. Okay. So question from Monet Bibo Reinhardt. I'm compiling a master database for all pre-contact copper artifacts in Americas, now nearly 80,000. I'm very excited to be able to attend this event. I'm understanding that copper tooling began in West Mexico around 500 CD, but I'm yet unclear what or when smelting began, especially of bells. It also surprised me that there are not coppers found in Teotihuacan. My question, if the presenters found any signs of metal smelting, bells making in New Mexico, I study a database in Santa Fe. Well, yes, one of the important things to make this clear, it's like, that's why I think that it's not a major smelting thing going on uh, before 900s. And there's a very clear things. As you said, Teotihuacan doesn't have, and as a city like Teotihuacan, of course, and now we know ended around the 600s, uh, could have copper objects, of course. But also, if we go to the West Mexico and we see the epiclassic sites, that epiclassic we are calling it 600 to 900s, those sites also doesn't have copper, like Tingambato, for instance. Tingambato was a major site. It's a major site in West Mexico from those times. We have a lot of radiocarbon data on that. I work a lot on those sites, and there's no a single copper object. Or in another big sites from that period of time, from the El Grillo phase. So that's another important or strong evidence that copper smelting probably was not a major deal or doesn't happen before 900s. So, and about smelting in New Mexico, I don't know. I don't have information on that. But as I propose, I think it's possible to smelt and do these kind of things so much easily that we uh, normally think about it. Okay, let me take the next one. Jerry Holmes, were these Ecuadorian explorers looking for copper or metals and just exploring broader practice with them? Okay, Jerry, well, that's another big topic. These Ecuadorian people that goes, probably these interactions are way more profound than only the copper thing. Uh, we have a lot of different things happening in the area. We have the Shap tombs corresponding from the Tierra Adentro area in Colombia, that the ones that we have in West Mexico. We have certain types of architectural constructions, very similar. We have a lot of things similar going on. Uh, but the probably the best guess, it's like the people or these people are looking for shells, because one of because one of the spondylus shell, this red shell, it's very precious on both in Mesoamerica and in Northern South America. And the areas in front of West Mexico, there are areas with a lot of these kind of shells. So probably that shell is another key element that we need to think about it. For sure, copper was smelted in West Mexico as early as 600. Monet, yes, as I said, no, I don't. I don't think so. I don't think so. Lynn Radner, regarding the raft boat theory of transmission of mining technology from Ecuador, doesn't this accord with nautical possibilities, current directions? Well, Lynn, as I mentioned, Dorothy Hostler talked about that, and she analyzed the possibilities of the currents and everything. So even with that in mind, it's possible to do this boat trip going up into West Mexico, but they said that they're gonna stay here in West Mexico for 6 months or 5 months to wait like the currents and all the conditions let them go back into South America. So that's an important thing, and it's possible. Uh, Let me see. Marilyn Gita. Uh, Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Marilyn, for your comments. And Rosa Palomino, also thank you very much for your comments. Let me see. Okay, Mary Tomizuka. What are the size of the bells? Well, the size of the bells, there are a lot of different size on these. Are little tiny ones, like a centimeter, uh, or are big ones, like almost 15 centimeters. So it has a lot of variations, but the normal bells are less than an inch I can say. I'm not very familiar with inch, but it's like an inch more or less uh, size, but there's a variety on that. uh, okay, Linda Berzog. Well, I talk about the common sizes and the functions, as I mentioned at the very end. uh, well, the functions of those are a lot have to going on with the sounds, like this rain water thing going on. As I talk about this Tlalok storm god complex, very important in the Aztlan, came with the bells. So these bells also could be on this part of idea. But on the other hand, as I mentioned, in the archaeological context, is very common to find those bells in the Southwest, more in Cache. So would be a very luxurious and very well protected, I don't know how to say that in English, items. And in West Mexico probably are different. And it changed in different societies, I think, or it's what I want to say. Like the Tarascans, that it's the case that I work more. The gold is very important because the gold is associated with one of the major deities, and it's the sun. And the moon is associated with the silver, and that's why they want to use these colors for that. And 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 also it's very associated with the power, with the gold and the representation of the gods on the earth and things like that. So it's a very very extensive topic, but I hope that make you key points on that. uh, Jean, thank you. Well, not my English is not that good, so sorry about that. Mauricio Ruiz Velasco, thank you very much for your comments. Teresa Rojas, no te preocupes por escribir en español. Una compañera. ¿Qué combustible usaron y hasta dónde sabemos qué carbón vegetal se utilizaba en Mesoamérica o es una escala reducida y qué cera se utilizaba? Gracias, felicidades. Teresa, well, she's talking about what's the fuel. And well, we are doing experimentation. We have a chapter of archaeological experimental archaeology. And in the Tierra Caliente, they are using different types of encino negro, and another type. And we are working with charcoal traditional makers. I don't know if that says that in English. Uh, but that's a major problem because in the Tierra Caliente area, it's a, you know, it's a low jungle. There's not so much of this kind of fuel that works good. And now we work with the smelters in Santa Clara, and they use pine. Uh, probably one of the things that the metal smelting moves from the pre-Hispanic times that has a very limited amount of copper ingots that were made, they move more into the highlands. And even at the end of the pre-Hispanic times, probably that happens too. Like in sites like Jicalan, for instance, that we are working now, that's in the limit of the pine trees expansion of those days. So they are using that, and in colonial times, that's why they move totally, because there's a lot more fuel that you use for smelt than the copper that you made. For instance, if you want to, like we saw over there, to make at least 200 kilos ingot done by in Santa Clara that we saw, they use like 600 kilos of charcoal. So there's a lot more charcoal to do this. Okay. My computer is possible to put it online perhaps a few days. Thank you from the Netherlands. Thank you, Lynette or Lennert. Sorry about. And yes, I think that will be online for a time. I don't know. Annie could tell us that about it.
Yes, it will be online hopefully by Tuesday.
Sorry.
It will hopefully be online on our YouTube channel by Tuesday, and our participants will also receive an email with the link.
Okay. Thank you so much. Yeah. Um, well, let me see. Well, the sites in Arizona, New Mexico, Robin was talking about, there's a lot more. If you have my email, you can send me an email and I can send you a complete list of the sites. But for that also, I recommend you, strongly recommend you the two theses that I show up. Also the Victoria Vargas and the most recent one of Ian, uh, because they have a very detailed talk about on all of these. Uh, okay, thank you, Patricia, and I hope see you too soon too here in Michoacán. Elaine, thank you. Jesus Sarco. There's a direct interaction between Tierra Caliente and the Cerro de Trincheras. Well, directly, I don't think so, Jesus. I think they are using, or they are part of the same network information network. Sorry, that they share these ideas of these, for instance, like this, as we mentioned, these Trilok bells, and they are using it or they are consuming it. But a direct link like that, I don't think about that. I think there are more in the way of the ideas. Efrain, thank you very much. Efrain Flores, thank you very much. Did they get the fire hot enough to make metal melt, Vecina? Yes, they do. And we have some experimentations on that too. And actually we can do it. It's very hard to blow all that amount of air to have that kind of fire, but it's possible. Definitely it's possible. Robin Walker. Yeah, it's possible to do to have photographs. You are asking about photographs in the Museo de las Culturas del Norte. I was director over there. Yeah, it's possible. If you want to publish it, you have to make and have a permit from the National Institute, but it's possible, definitely. Emiliano Melgar. Hola, Emiliano. Espero que todavía andes por ahí. It's a colleague from the Institute too. Uh, he said, "Who do you think there were people moving these goods up to the north? And do you similarities or difference in the distribution of metal objects and other goods in both ways, like scarlet macaws and turquoise?" Well, yes, I think of course there are people moving these. I don't know. I'm not comfortable with the idea, like the peso idea of these pochetecas to move all the way and carrying all. But the real thing is like these mecapaleros, they still doing this even to the 20th century. So definitely are these, and as you said, there's a lot of other things going on. You know very well, you're a specialist, Emiliano, on turquoise, and as you know, there's are these networks that also connect these blue-green stones moving, but also there's the cacao, also are the scarlet macaws, the feathers. There's a bunch of other the pyrite mirrors and a lot of different items that goes all the way with the copper too in these interaction networks. So it's very important to think this not only from a single point of view or only the technological issue, but more in theme in terms of what's going on in a broader way in this interaction networks. Paul Smith, I have a big classic site with a Slack stat in Xochipala. Yes, Paul, and I know I saw your materials. Do you with pictures of that, and I really want to discuss with you about the dates, the dates of that. Of course, we need a lot of more work. I don't say that it's not possible to have it earlier in the Epic Classic, but we need to think about that a lot way more. In the other hand, all the sites that I work in the Balsas River, as you know, I also work a little bit down in the Balsas River like you. In that period of time, we don't have any copper or slag evidence or for smelting for the Epic Classic. But of course, we need to talk and discuss about these. Uh, Thank you, Mary Jane Weaver, Edgar Mendoza. Thank you very much. And yes, we need to work on the RTI things. Uh, Let me see. Donna Tang. There was a lot of metallurgy, especially gold in Central America, and that was an overland road to Mexico. Donna, I'm not familiar with the metal into Central America, and but of course there's a lot of relationships going on. I left all that part uh, on the other side because my expertise in northern Mexico and West Mexico. But there's a lot of things we need to talk about the Central Mexico Basin, the Oaxaca, the Mayan, and there's a lot of things going on. David Killick. Uh, well, David Killick is another very important that knows a lot of this issue, and they said that there isn't any evidence of a smelting in New Mexico and Arizona. Yes, and he looked onto it, and yes, I'm absolutely agree on this. And I work with Veronica Orton, Paquimé, Copper Pepper, and you see, and you don't think like uh, like there's enough to evidence to say uh, that there's evidence of metal smelting in Paquimé. Well, yes, I don't debate that. I know that you work also on this, and as I said, it's a very polemic thing. But uh, but I really wants to check it out again, all that information, and make a new analysis and see what's going on. Probably not, and you're right, and they are bring us finished objects. But well, let's see. Uh, Linda Stacy, the 50% of Paquime. Uh, yeah, the only the 50% is excavated could be more evidence. For sure, will be more evidence. I don't know if support or not, as David says on that, but I don't know. We have to still working. Random wire. Random aware, did you find any evidence of turquoise with copper deposits in Michoacán? That's a difficult question, Randy. First, say hi. Unfortunately, no. We are looking it also with David Killick that he asked before. We talk about that possibility, and we are looking on it for in West Mexico, but since now we didn't found anyone. David Killick and Alison Thibodeau have uh, a great work on the possibility of have a turquoise deposit on West Mexico. I hope could be over there, but I don't know. I didn't found it yet, but we're still working on that area, so we will see. Uh, Guillermo Lara, discover this Occidente crafts work at the basin of Mexico. Well, they are like a similar tradition. They have their own particularities in central Mexico, in the basin of Mexico, in Tenochtitlan, but also there are a lot of things going on in the same page. So yes. Well, I don't know if we have enough time, Annie. There's a bunch of other questions.
You know, you have taken quite a few questions. If you wanted to take one or two more, and then we can go ahead and wrap it up.
Okay, perfect. Thanks so much. Well, sorry about that, but I will, I can answer you all your questions by email. If you send me an email, or if I have all these questions, I will send it to you emails to every one of you. Thank you very much. And well, we can stop there because there's a bunch more. And thank you very much, everyone, for your comments.
And thank you, Jose Luis, for just a fantastic presentation. We appreciate your time and your expertise, and hopefully we'll have you back again.
Oh yeah, sure. Thank you. Anytime.
All right. And thanks to all of our guests today, and hopefully we will see you at another Amerind presentation soon. All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye. Thank you.